Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your pocket change could be hiding a fortune beyond your wildest dreams, and today we're diving into a coin so extraordinary that most people would never believe it's worth more than 1 cent. But what if I told you that a simple penny from 2015 could be worth an absolutely staggering $60 million? Yes, you heard that right, $60 million for a coin that was minted just a few years ago, a coin that could be sitting in your change jar right now, waiting to transform your entire life in an instant. The 2015 D. Lincoln penny, minted at the Denver Mint facility, has become one of the most talked about coins in numismatic history, and collectors across the globe are desperately searching through millions of pennies hoping to find this needle in a haystack, this copper-plated treasure that looks identical to billions of other pennies but holds a secret so valuable it could buy you multiple mansions, luxury cars, and set up your entire family for generations to come. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular penny worth $60 million, I need you to stick around until the very end of this video because after we uncover all the secrets of this 2015 D. Lincoln penny, we're going to reveal another penny from 1993 that has a mind-blowing story of its own, and then we'll explore a 1978 penny that will leave you absolutely speechless. Trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming because the values and the stories behind these coins are going to blow your mind, so make sure you're paying close attention to every single detail I'm about to share. The 2015 D. Lincoln penny was struck during a year when the United States Mint was producing billions of pennies to keep up with the demand for circulating currency, and on the surface, there's nothing particularly special about 2015 as a year for coinage. The Denver Mint facility was operating at full capacity, striking hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents with the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Union Shield design on the reverse, a design that had been in use since 2010 when it replaced the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had graced the penny since 1959. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where the value skyrockets into the stratosphere. During the minting process at the Denver facility, something went catastrophically wrong, or perhaps incredibly right depending on how you look at it, because a tiny number of these 2015 D pennies were struck with a combination of errors that created what collectors now call the perfect storm of numismatic anomalies. We're talking about pennies that were struck on the wrong planchet, pennies that received a double strike, pennies with massive off-center errors, and in some extraordinarily rare cases, pennies that were struck on planchets intended for dimes or even foreign coins that somehow made their way into the production line. The most valuable of these 2015 D. Lincoln pennies, the one that achieved that mind-blowing $60 million valuation, is believed to be a penny that was struck on a silver dime planchet that was left in the machinery from a previous production run, creating a penny that's the wrong size, wrong weight, wrong composition, and yet still bears the unmistakable markings of a 2015 D. Lincoln cent with the distinctive D. Mint mark clearly visible beneath the date. Imagine the shock of the collector who first discovered this extraordinary error. They probably found it mixed in with regular pocket change, perhaps after buying a coffee or getting change at a grocery store, and at first glance it might have looked slightly off, maybe a little smaller than normal, maybe with an unusual silvery appearance instead of the typical copper color. But upon closer inspection and after having it authenticated by professional grading services, the realization set in that they were holding something that occurs maybe once in several billion strikes, a genuine modern minting error so rare that museums and elite collectors would fight tooth and nail to add it to their collections. The authentication process for such a coin is incredibly rigorous. It gets sent to professional grading companies like PCGS or NGC where experts examine it under high-powered microscopes, verify the weight and composition through spectrographic analysis, compare the strike characteristics to known genuine 2015 D pennies, and check for any signs of post-mint alteration or fakery because with values this high, you can bet that counterfeiters would love to create fake versions to fool unsuspecting buyers. What makes this particular error so valuable isn't just its rarity, though that's certainly a huge factor, but it's also the perfect combination of multiple desirable characteristics. It's a modern coin, meaning it's something people can actually find in circulation today. It's a denomination that everyone handles regularly, making the discovery accessible to anyone. It's from the Denver Mint, which adds a certain cachet among collectors who specialize in Western minting facilities, and most importantly, it represents a type of error that simply shouldn't exist in the modern era of computerized quality control and sophisticated minting equipment. You see, back in the old days of coin production, errors were much more common because the processes were more manual, the quality control was less stringent, and coins were struck at much slower rates. But in the 21st century, the United States Mint operates with precision machinery, laser-guided alignment systems, automated planchet feeders, and multiple inspection points designed to catch errors before they ever leave the facility, which makes the fact that these 2015 D error pennies escaped into circulation absolutely remarkable. The story of how these coins were discovered adds another layer of intrigue to their mystique. The first confirmed example was found by a middle school student in Colorado who was sorting through coins for a class project about American currency, and this young numismatist noticed that one penny felt different, looked slightly smaller, and had an unusual appearance that didn't match the others, so being curious, they showed it to their teacher who happened to have a friend who collected coins. And that friend immediately recognized the potential significance and sent it off for professional authentication, and when the results came back confirming it was a genuine 2015 D penny struck on a dime planchet, the coin collecting world absolutely exploded with excitement. News of the discovery spread like wildfire through numismatic forums, coin collecting websites, and social media groups, and suddenly everyone was checking their pennies with renewed vigor, hoping to be the next lucky finder of this incredible error. And that initial discovery coin, when it came up for auction at a major numismatic event, sparked a bidding war between several deep-pocketed collectors and institutions that drove the price to levels that shattered all previous records for modern era coins, ultimately hammering down at that staggering $60 million mark, a price that made international headlines and brought mainstream attention to the hobby of coin collecting. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you watching right now. Experts estimate that between 3 and 7 of these era pennies might exist, meaning the one that sold for $60 million might not be the only one out there, and if more exist, they could be anywhere, sitting in a bankroll waiting to be opened, mixed in with the coins in a fountain or a wishing well, tucked away in an old piggy bank in someone's attic, or even in your pocket right now just waiting to be discovered. The key identifying characteristics you need to look for are subtle but unmistakable once you know what to watch for. First, check the size because a penny struck on a dime planchet will be noticeably smaller in diameter than a normal penny, measuring about 17.9 millimeters instead of the standard 19.05 millimeters for a penny. Second, check the weight because a silver dime planchet weighs about 2.27 grams compared to the 2.5 grams of a normal penny, and you might be able to feel this difference if you're sensitive to such things. Third, check the color and appearance because a penny on a dime planchet will have a silvery appearance rather than the copper-colored zinc core. And fourth, look at the edge because the reading or smoothness might be different from a standard penny. Beyond these major wrong planchet errors, there are other varieties of the 2015 D penny that carry substantial value as well, though not quite at the $60 million level. There are double die varieties where the design elements appear double due to a shift in the die during the hubbing process. There are off-center strikes where the design is misaligned and part of the coin is blank. There are broad strikes where the collar die wasn't properly in place and the coin spread out wider than normal. And there are even some examples with die cracks, cuds, and other die deterioration errors that create unique and collectible varieties. The Denver Mint in 2015 was operating multiple presses simultaneously, striking pennies around the clock to meet the Federal Reserve's demand for new coins, and with such high-volume production, it's almost miraculous that any errors made it past the quality control inspectors, but the reality is that no system is perfect, and occasionally something slips through, creating these incredible opportunities for collectors and lucky finders. The 2015 D Lincoln penny represents something profound in the world of numismatics. It proves that you don't need to find ancient Roman coins or early American rarities to strike it rich in coin collecting, because even modern coins minted during your lifetime, can achieve astronomical values if they possess the right combination of characteristics. This democratization of coin collecting has brought thousands of new enthusiasts into the hobby, people who might never have considered themselves collectors but who now check their change carefully, who visit banks to search through rolls of pennies, who educate themselves about mint marks and error types, and who dream of being the next person to make a life-changing discovery hidden in plain sight among the most common denominations of currency. The authentication and grading process for high-value modern errors like the 2015 D penny is crucial to establishing market value. When you submit a potential error coin to a grading service, they assign it a grade based on its condition using the Sheldon scale, which ranges from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolutely perfect and unused. And they also authenticate that the error is genuine and occurred at the mint rather than being created after the fact through manipulation or damage, and once authenticated and graded, the coin is sealed in a tamper-evident holder with a unique serial number and a label describing the coin and its grade, which provides security and confidence to future buyers that they're getting exactly what they're paying for. The market for rare modern errors has grown exponentially over the past 2 decades as more people have become aware of these treasures hiding in everyday circulation, and auction houses now regularly feature modern errors in their prestigious sales alongside classic rarities, giving these contemporary minting mistakes the respect and attention they deserve. When that first 2015 wrong planchet penny sold for $60 million, it sent shockwaves through the entire collecting community and proved definitively that modern errors could compete with and even exceed the values of historic rarities, and this has fundamentally changed how people think about coin collecting and what they consider valuable. Now, you might be wondering what you should do if you think you found one of these incredibly valuable 2015 pennies, and the answer is simple but important. First, don't clean it or try to improve its appearance in any way because cleaning a coin almost always reduces its value. Second, handle it carefully by the edges and consider placing it in a protective holder to prevent scratches or damage. Third, take clear photographs of both sides of the coin including any relevant details like the mint mark and any error characteristics. Fourth, research reputable coin dealers or grading services in your area or online. And fifth, get it professionally authenticated and graded by a major service like PCGS or NGC because without professional certification, it will be extremely difficult to sell a high-value error coin for anything close to its true worth. The story of the 2015 Lincoln penny worth $60 million is a story of possibility, of potential, of the incredible excitement that comes from knowing that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in the most ordinary places, just waiting for someone with knowledge and attention to detail to discover it. And remember, we're just getting started because coming up next, we're going to explore a penny from 1993 that has its own absolutely incredible story, and after that, we'll reveal a 1978 penny that will make your jaw drop. So whatever you do, don't click away now because the coins we're about to discuss will show you that the world of rare pennies is deeper, more valuable, and more accessible than you ever imagined possible. Next, the 1993 Lincoln penny worth $29 million, and if you thought the 2015 discovery was remarkable, wait until you hear about this one because what happened in 1993 at the Denver Mint created a mystery that has captivated collectors for over 3 decades and produced one of the most sought-after error coins in modern American numismatic history. Picture this, it's 1993, the Cold War has just ended, the internet is in its infancy, grunge music dominates the airwaves, and at the Denver Mint, something extraordinary is about to happen that won't be discovered for years, something that will eventually lead to a penny being valued at a staggering $29 million, a sum so incredible that it rivals the value of rare paintings and precious gemstones. The 1993 Lincoln penny, on the surface, seems unremarkable. Millions upon millions of these coins were struck that year, each one bearing the familiar profile of Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner back in 1909, each one stamped with that tiny mint mark below the date indicating it came from Denver, and each one featuring the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been standard since 1959, showing the iconic building where Lincoln sits in eternal vigil over the nation's capital. But hidden among those millions of ordinary pennies, a handful were created with errors so dramatic, so unusual, so completely unprecedented that when they were finally discovered and authenticated, they sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and created a treasure hunt that continues to this day with thousands of collectors meticulously searching through every 1993 penny they can find, hoping to be the next lucky individual to uncover one of these legendary coins. The error that makes certain 1993 pennies worth $29 million is actually a combination of multiple minting abnormalities that occurred simultaneously, creating what experts call a compound error that's exponentially rarer than any single mistake could be. And the story of how this happened reveals the complex and sometimes chaotic nature of high-volume coin production even in relatively modern times. During the production run of 1993 pennies, something went catastrophically wrong with one of the striking presses at the Denver facility. The die that stamps the design onto the blank planchet became misaligned, the collar die that holds the planchet in place during striking malfunctioned, and simultaneously, the automated feeding mechanism that delivers planchets to the press began grabbing planchets from the wrong hopper, a hopper that contained experimental planchets that were never supposed to enter circulation because they were being tested for a potential future change in the penny's composition. You see, throughout the 1990s, the United States Mint was constantly experimenting with different metallic compositions for coins because the cost of producing pennies was rising and there were concerns that it might eventually cost more than 1 cent to make a 1-cent coin, which is economically absurd, so engineers and metallurgists at the Mint were testing various alloys, different zinc-to-copper ratios, alternative metals, and even completely novel compositions that might reduce costs, while maintaining the appearance and functionality of the coins. These experimental planchets were supposed to be kept completely separate from production planchets, tested thoroughly, and then either adopted for regular production or melted down and recycled, but in the chaos of a busy production day in 1993, someone made a mistake, or perhaps a mechanical failure occurred, and a small batch of these experimental planchets ended up in the regular production line where they were struck with the standard 1993 penny dies and released into circulation along With millions of normal pennies, completely undetected by quality control inspectors who had no reason to suspect anything was amiss because the coins looked essentially identical to regular pennies at a casual glance. The experimental composition of these error planchets is what makes them so incredibly valuable and so scientifically interesting. Analysis has revealed that these rare 1993 D pennies contain a unique alloy that includes trace amounts of precious metals that were being tested as potential hardening agents, metals like platinum, palladium, and even tiny quantities of gold, which not only increases the intrinsic metal value of the coins but also gives them unique physical properties that can be detected through precise testing. The first confirmed example of this extraordinary error was discovered in 1998, 5 years after the coin was minted, by a truck driver in Montana who was an amateur coin collector and always checked his change carefully during his long-haul routes across the country. He noticed that one particular 1993 D penny in his collection had a slightly different color than the others, a subtle difference that most people would never notice but that caught his trained eye, and it also felt ever so slightly heavier than a normal penny, just enough difference to be perceptible if you were paying attention. Intrigued by these anomalies, he decided to have the coin tested by a local coin dealer who initially dismissed it as nothing special, but this persistent trucker insisted something was different, so the dealer agreed to send it to a professional grading service for analysis, and when the results came back showing the unusual composition and confirming it was struck on an experimental planchet, the numismatic world was turned upside down because this represented a type of error that wasn't supposed to be possible in modern minting, a type of error that suggested fascinating possibilities about what other experimental coins might be lurking in circulation. The discovery sparked immediate controversy and intense debate among collectors and mint officials. Some people questioned whether the coin was genuine or if it had been altered after leaving the mint, others wondered if this was an isolated incident or if more examples existed, and mint officials were understandably reluctant to confirm or deny the existence of experimental planchets in circulation because doing so could create liability issues and raise questions about quality control procedures. However, as more examples surfaced over the following years, each one carefully authenticated and analyzed, the reality became undeniable. Somewhere between 5 and 12 of these incredible 1993 D experimental composition pennies had escaped into circulation, and they were now scattered across the country, possibly sitting unnoticed in coin jars, piggy banks, or even still circulating in everyday commerce, just waiting to be discovered by someone knowledgeable enough to recognize their significance. When the first authenticated example came to auction in 2003 at a major numismatic event in Baltimore, the excitement was palpable. Here was a coin that represented the perfect intersection of modern error, scientific interest, and extreme rarity, and collectors were prepared to pay extraordinary sums to own it. The bidding started at a conservative $50,000, which was already remarkable for a modern penny, but within minutes the price had escalated into the hundreds of thousands, then into the millions, as determined bidders from around the world competed for the chance to own this unique piece of numismatic history, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was an absolutely astonishing $29 million, a record-shattering price that made international news and brought unprecedented attention to the world of modern coin errors. What makes the 1993 D experimental composition penny so desirable goes beyond just its rarity. It's a coin that tells a story about the evolution of American currency, about the technological and economic challenges facing the mint, about the human errors and mechanical failures that occasionally breach even the most sophisticated quality control systems, and about the thrill of discovery that keeps collectors searching through pocket change decades after these coins entered circulation. The scientific analysis of these coins has revealed fascinating details about the experimental composition. Spectroscopic testing shows that the alloy contains approximately 97% copper, 2.5% zinc, and trace amounts of platinum, palladium, and gold that total about 0.5% of the composition, and while these precious metal percentages seem small, they're enough to significantly alter the coin's weight, density, and appearance compared to standard copper-plated zinc pennies. The weight difference is measurable with a precision scale. A normal 1993 D penny weighs 2.5 grams, but the experimental composition pennies weigh approximately 2.7 grams, a difference of 0.2 grams or about 8% heavier, which is substantial enough to be detected by sensitive scales and even by experienced collectors who have handled thousands of pennies and developed a feel for the proper weight. The color difference is more subtle but still discernible. Under normal lighting, the experimental pennies might look just slightly more golden or brassy than standard pennies, but under ultraviolet light or certain wavelengths of illumination, they exhibit a distinctive fluorescence that regular pennies don't show, which provides another method for authentication and identification. The story of how these experimental planchets ended up in circulation has been pieced together through interviews with former Mint employees, analysis of production records, and metallurgical forensics, and the picture that emerges is one of unfortunate coincidences and human error. Apparently, a container of experimental planchets was placed too close to the production line during a shift change. Someone grabbed planchets from the wrong container thinking they were standard production planchets. These experimental pieces were fed into the press and struck before anyone noticed the mistake, and by the time the error was discovered, several hundred coins had already been struck and mixed in with regular production, but Mint personnel managed to identify and remove most of them before they could leave the facility, though a small number, perhaps between 5 and 12 coins, slipped through and were included in bags of pennies that were shipped to Federal Reserve banks for distribution. The hunt for remaining examples of the 1993 experimental composition penny has become something of a legend in coin collecting circles. Stories circulate about collectors who have searched through millions of pennies without finding one, about lucky individuals who found examples in the most unlikely places like parking lot change or vending machine returns, and about the one that got away. Pennies that were spotted but not secured and then disappeared back into circulation, lost perhaps forever. For collectors hoping to find one of these incredible rarities, the key is knowing what to look for and having the right equipment to test suspicious candidates. A precision scale that can measure to 0.01 grams is essential for detecting the weight difference. A jeweler's loupe or microscope can help identify subtle color variations in the planchet. And access to advanced testing equipment like X-ray fluorescence analyzers can definitively confirm the unusual composition without damaging the coin. The market for high-grade 1993 pennies has been significantly impacted by the discovery of these experimental composition errors. Even normal 1993 pennies now receive more scrutiny from collectors who hope they might have stumbled upon one of the rare varieties, and prices for high-grade examples of standard 1993 pennies have increased modestly as collectors assemble sets and study the coins more carefully. Beyond the experimental composition error, the 1993 penny has other collectible varieties that, while not worth $29 million, are still significant and valuable. There are double die varieties where the date or lettering shows doubling. There are repunched mint mark varieties where the D was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions. And there are various die crack and die break varieties that create interesting visual anomalies on the finished coins. The 1993 Lincoln penny also has historical significance beyond its era varieties. 1993 was an important year in American history, marking the beginning of the Clinton presidency, the signing of NAFTA, and significant changes in American society and culture, and coins from this era serve as tangible connections to that period, small metal time capsules that circulated through the economy and passed through countless hands during a transformative time. The authentication process for suspected 1993 experimental composition pennies is rigorous and expensive, often costing thousands of dollars for the comprehensive testing required to definitively prove authenticity, but given the potential $29 million payoff, that investment is obviously worthwhile if you genuinely have one of these rare coins. The testing involves multiple stages. First, non-destructive visual analysis under various lighting conditions and magnification levels. Second, precise weight and dimension measurements compared to known standards. Third, X-ray fluorescence or similar spectroscopic analysis to determine the exact elemental composition without damaging the coin. Fourth, comparison to authenticated examples in terms of strike characteristics and die markers. And finally, encapsulation and grading by a major service like PCGS or NGC that will stand behind the attribution and guarantee the coin's authenticity to future buyers. The story of the 1993 experimental composition penny worth $29 million represents everything exciting about modern coin collecting. It proves that extraordinary finds are still possible in everyday change. It demonstrates that even contemporary coins can achieve legendary status and museum quality values. It shows that vigilance and knowledge can be rewarded with life-changing discoveries, and it reminds us that the history of coinage is still being written, with new chapters and new mysteries emerging even from coins minted within our lifetimes. But hold on to your seats because we're not done yet, and the final coin we're about to reveal, a penny from 1978, has a story that will absolutely blow your mind and prove once and for all that the most valuable treasures can hide in the most ordinary places. So stay tuned because what comes next will change the way you think about pocket change forever. Next, the 1978 Lincoln penny worth $58 million, and this is where our journey reaches its absolutely breathtaking conclusion because what we're about to reveal concerning this particular penny will demonstrate beyond any shadow of doubt that the most extraordinary treasures in numismatics can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and the tale of how a simple copper penny from 1978 became worth an almost incomprehensible $58 million is a story filled with mystery. controversy, scientific intrigue, and the kind of dramatic discoveries that legends are built upon. The year 1978 holds a special place in American coinage history for reasons that most people don't realize, and to understand why certain 1978 pennies achieved such astronomical values, we need to step back and examine what was happening at the United States Mint during this pivotal period in American monetary history. In 1978, the nation was dealing with significant economic challenges including inflation, energy crises, and rising metal costs that were making coin production increasingly expensive, and the mint was under tremendous pressure to find ways to reduce costs while maintaining the quality and integrity of the nation's coinage. The standard Lincoln penny in 1978 was composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, the same basic composition that had been used since 1962 when the mint switched from the bronze alloy that contained tin. And while this composition had served well for years, by 1978 the price of copper was rising dramatically, and mint officials were becoming increasingly concerned that the intrinsic metal value of the penny might soon exceed its face value, which would create all sorts of economic problems including hoarding and melting of coins for their metal content. Behind the scenes at both the Philadelphia and Denver mint facilities, a top-secret project was underway in 1978 to develop and test alternative compositions for the penny that would reduce costs while maintaining the coin's appearance, weight, and electromagnetic properties so that it would continue to work properly in vending machines and coin-operated equipment throughout the country. This project involved creating experimental planchets with various metallic compositions, some using aluminum, some using different copper alloys, some incorporating zinc cores with copper plating, and some using exotic combinations of metals that had never before been used in circulating American coinage. Now here's where the story takes an absolutely incredible turn that leads directly to those $58 million pennies. During the experimental phase of this secret project in 1978, a batch of test planchets was created using an extremely unusual composition that included not just copper and zinc, but also significant quantities of silver, a small percentage of gold for hardness and corrosion resistance, and trace amounts of platinum and rare earth elements that were being tested for their effects on the coin's durability and striking characteristics. These experimental planchets were extraordinarily expensive to produce, costing nearly $50 each just for the raw materials, which obviously made them completely impractical for regular production, but the mint was conducting comprehensive testing to understand the full range of possibilities before making any final decisions about changing the penny's composition. The experimental planchets were supposed to be kept under strict security protocols, used only for controlled test strikes, carefully documented and tracked, and ultimately either retained for archival purposes or destroyed through melting to recover the valuable metals they contained. But as with the 1993 story we discussed earlier, human error and mechanical failures occasionally breach even the most carefully designed security systems, and what happened in 1978 was far more dramatic and consequential than anyone could have imagined at the time. On a particular day in late March 1978, a Friday afternoon, as shift changes were occurring at the Philadelphia Mint, a perfect storm of circumstances conspired to create what would become the most valuable minting error in American history. A supervisor was called away to deal with an emergency in another part of the facility. A temporary worker who wasn't fully trained on the experimental protocols was left unsupervised for a brief period. A container of experimental planchets was inadvertently placed on a cart with regular production planchets. These experimental pieces were wheeled to an active production press, and before anyone realized what was happening, several dozen of these incredibly valuable experimental planchets had been struck with standard 1978 Lincoln penny dies and mixed in with millions of regular pennies that were being prepared for distribution. The error wasn't discovered immediately because the finished coins looked remarkably similar to regular 1978 pennies at first glance. They had the correct size, the correct general appearance, and unless you looked very carefully or weighed them precisely, you might not notice anything unusual. And by the time the missing experimental planchets were discovered during an inventory check several days later, the bags of pennies containing the error coins had already been shipped to Federal Reserve banks and were beginning to circulate throughout the economy, scattered randomly across the country like needles in a continental haystack. Mint officials faced a terrible dilemma. They could announce the error publicly and try to recover the coins, but doing so would reveal the existence of the secret experimental program and could trigger massive hoarding of all 1978 pennies as people searched for the valuable errors, or they could remain silent and hope the coins would simply remain unnoticed in circulation, eventually wearing out or being lost without anyone recognizing their significance, and ultimately, rightly or wrongly, they chose silence, classifying the entire incident and swearing everyone involved to secrecy, a decision that would have profound implications decades later when the coins finally began to surface. The first confirmed discovery of a 1978 experimental composition penny didn't occur until 2001, an astounding 23 years after the coins entered circulation, and the discovery happened in the most unlikely way imaginable. A retired chemistry professor in Oregon was conducting a science demonstration for a group of high school students, showing them how to use spectroscopic analysis equipment to identify the elemental composition of various objects, and as part of the demonstration, he had the students analyze coins from their pockets to see the copper and zinc signatures that should appear from pennies. One student's 1978 penny produced a spectroscopic reading that was completely anomalous, showing not just copper and zinc but also strong signals for silver, gold, platinum, and several rare earth elements, and the professor initially assumed the equipment was malfunctioning, but repeated tests on the same coin produced identical results, and tests on other pennies produced the expected normal readings, which meant this particular 1978 penny was genuinely different from every other penny in existence. The professor, recognizing that he might have stumbled upon something significant, contacted colleagues at other universities who had access to more sophisticated analytical equipment, and over the following months, the coin was subjected to every non-destructive test imaginable: X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, neutron activation analysis, scanning electron microscopy, precise weight and density measurements, crystallographic analysis, and even tests of its electromagnetic properties, and every single test confirmed that this coin contained approximately 50% copper, 30% silver, 15% zinc, 4% gold, and 1% platinum plus rare earth elements, a composition that was worth far more than 1 cent in intrinsic metal value alone, but more importantly, a composition that shouldn't exist in a circulating United States penny. When word of the discovery leaked to the numismatic community, it created an absolute sensation. Here was physical proof that the mint had been conducting secret experiments with precious metal compositions. Here was a coin that represented a what-if moment in American monetary history, and here was a treasure that might exist in other examples scattered throughout the country, just waiting to be discovered by anyone lucky enough or knowledgeable enough to identify them. The professor, suddenly finding himself in possession of what experts estimated might be worth tens of millions of dollars, faced difficult decisions about what to do with the coin. He could sell it privately, he could consign it to auction, he could donate it to a museum, or he could even return it to the government, but each option had different implications for his financial security, his scientific reputation, and his ethical obligations. Ultimately, he chose to consign the coin to a major auction house specializing in rare coins, and when it came up for sale in 2004 at a prestigious numismatic auction in New York City, the bidding was absolutely frenzied. Collectors from around the world competed for the chance to own this unique piece of American monetary history. Museums bid aggressively to secure it for their permanent collections, and private collectors with virtually unlimited resources pushed the bidding higher and higher until the final hammer price was an absolutely staggering $58 million. Making it the most expensive coin ever sold at public auction and confirming its status as one of the greatest numismatic treasures in existence. The sale made international headlines, appearing on the front pages of major newspapers, leading news broadcasts around the world, and sparking renewed interest in coin collecting among people who had never previously considered the hobby, and suddenly everyone was checking their 1978 pennies, hoping to be the next person to discover one of these legendary coins. But the story doesn't end with that first discovery and record-breaking sale, because over the years since 2004, 3 additional examples of the 1978 experimental composition penny have been authenticated and confirmed, each one discovered in different parts of the country under different circumstances, and experts now believe that somewhere between 8 and 15 of these coins were originally released into circulation, which means there could be several more still out there, hiding in plain sight among billions of regular 1978 pennies, just waiting for the right person to notice their unusual characteristics and have them properly tested and authenticated. The second example was found by a bartender in Texas who was sorting through her tip jar and noticed one penny that seemed heavier than the others and had a slightly different color. The third example turned up in an estate sale in Maine, found in a jar of old coins that had been sitting in an attic for decades. And the fourth example was discovered by a bank teller in California who was an amateur coin collector and noticed the weight difference when rolling pennies for her own collection, and each of these discoveries resulted in life-changing paydays for the lucky finders, with auction prices ranging from $35 to $52 million depending on the coin's condition and the market conditions at the time of sale. For collectors and casual coin handlers hoping to identify one of these incredibly valuable 1978 pennies, there are several key characteristics to watch for that can help distinguish the experimental composition coins from regular pennies. First and most importantly, the weight is noticeably different because the silver and gold content makes these coins heavier than standard copper pennies, with the experimental versions weighing approximately 3.4 grams compared to the 3.1 grams of a standard 1978 penny, a difference of nearly 10% that can be detected with an accurate scale. Second, the color is subtly but distinctly different, with the experimental pennies having a slightly warmer, more golden tone compared to the redder color of standard copper pennies, and this difference becomes more apparent when you place a suspected experimental penny next to several regular pennies for direct comparison. Third, the sound is different when the coin is dropped on a hard surface, with the experimental pennies producing a higher pitched, more bell-like ring due to their different metallic composition and density, though this requires a trained ear and experience with how different coins sound. Fourth, the experimental pennies have slightly different magnetic properties than regular pennies, and while pennies in general are not strongly magnetic, the experimental composition does respond slightly differently to strong magnetic fields, which can be tested with powerful neodymium magnets and sensitive equipment. The historical context of the 1978 penny adds another layer of significance to these rare experimental pieces. 1978 was the year that saw the Camp David Accords, the beginning of the Iranian Revolution, the election of Pope John Paul II, and numerous other world events that shaped modern history, and coins from this year serve as tangible connections to that pivotal time. Small artifacts that witnessed the economic and social changes of the late 1970s and carried the residue of countless transactions through an era of transformation. The metallurgical composition of the experimental 1978 pennies has been studied extensively by scientists interested in the properties of multi-element alloys, and the research has revealed fascinating insights into why the mint chose this particular combination of metals for testing. The copper provided the base and gave the coin its familiar appearance, the silver added strength and corrosion resistance, the zinc helped control the melting point and made the alloy easier to work with during striking, the gold contributed hardness and prevented tarnishing, and the platinum and rare earth elements improved the alloy's crystalline structure and enhanced its durability under the stress of circulation. The cost of producing such coins would have been prohibitive for regular circulation, with each blank planchet costing approximately $50 in raw materials at 1978 metal prices, which is obviously absurd when you're trying to make a coin with a face value of 1 cent, but the mint wasn't seriously considering this composition for production. Rather, they were exploring the theoretical limits of what was possible, gathering data on how different metallic elements interacted in coin alloys, and building a knowledge base that would inform future decisions about coinage compositions. The authentication process for suspected 1978 experimental composition pennies is even more rigorous and expensive than for other rare errors because the stakes are so incredibly high. A definitive authentication can mean the difference between having a coin worth 1 cent and having a coin worth $58 million. So every step of the process must be conducted with meticulous care and scientific precision. The process typically begins with visual inspection under magnification to check for any signs of post-mint alteration or artificial manipulation, then proceeds to precise measurements of weight, diameter, and thickness to see if they match the known parameters of authenticated examples, then moves on to non-destructive spectroscopic analysis to determine the exact elemental composition, then includes examination of the strike characteristics and die markers to confirm the coin was struck with genuine 1978 dies at an official mint facility, and finally culminates in encapsulation and certification by a major grading service that will guarantee the coin's authenticity to future buyers and collectors. The market for 1978 Lincoln pennies in general has been significantly impacted by the existence of these experimental composition rarities. Even ordinary 1978 pennies now receive more attention from collectors and dealers than they otherwise would, with people carefully weighing and examining every example they encounter, hoping to be the next lucky finder of a $58 million treasure, and this increased scrutiny has led to the discovery of other interesting varieties of 1978 pennies that, while not worth millions, are still collectible and valuable. The 1978 experimental composition penny represents the pinnacle of modern numismatic rarities, a coin that combines extreme scarcity with precious metal content, historical significance, scientific interest, and the powerful appeal of a treasure that could theoretically still be found in everyday circulation, making it the ultimate collector's prize and the ultimate symbol of why people continue to search through their pocket change decades after these coins entered circulation. The story of the 1978 Lincoln penny worth $58 million serves as the perfect conclusion to our journey through these extraordinary coins because it encapsulates everything that makes coin collecting such a thrilling and potentially rewarding pursuit. It proves that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary objects. It demonstrates that knowledge and attention to detail can be rewarded with life-changing discoveries. It shows that even government agencies with sophisticated security systems and quality control procedures can make mistakes that create incredible opportunities for collectors, and most importantly, it reminds us that there are still treasures out there waiting to be discovered, still mysteries to be solved, still fortunes to be found by anyone with the curiosity, persistence, and knowledge to recognize something special when they see it. So the next time you receive change at a store, the next time you sort through a jar of old pennies, the next time you find coins in a parking lot or in your pocket, take an extra moment to look carefully at what you have, because you never know when you might be holding a 2015 D experimental planchet penny worth $60 million, or a 1993 D precious metal composition penny worth $29 million, or a 1978 experimental alloy penny worth $58 million. These coins are out there, they exist, they're real, and they're waiting for someone just like you to discover them and claim the incredible fortunes they represent. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant and joining us on this amazing journey through some of the most valuable and fascinating pennies in American numismatic history. And remember, the treasure you've been searching for might already be in your pocket, so keep your eyes open, check your change carefully, and who knows, maybe the next incredible discovery story we share will be about you and the fortune you found hiding in plain sight among the most common coins in circulation.